Susan, thanks for joining us this morning. John Redman project, big project, important project for the state of Kansas.
Absolutely. I'll tell you a little bit about how the story came to be. We have 24 federal reservoirs in the state of Kansas, and we own storage in 13 of those. And through our office, the Kansas Water Office, we actually operate like a raw water utility. We sell that water to municipal and industrial customers. And John Redman Reservoir is one of those lakes that we own storage in. And one of our primary customers from that lake is Wolf Creek Nuclear Generating Station, and then 17 communities downstream from John Redman. But like all of our lakes in Kansas, they're filling up with sediment. And so as they fill up with sediment, that displaces the storage we have for water supply. So we've been looking for a number of alternatives to help reverse the clock and make sure we can have that water supply storage going into the future. And John Redman's really our poster child for that issue. Our analysis in office let us know that if we had the drought that we've been going through since 2011 and 2012, that we don't have sufficient supplies in that reservoir to meet our customers' demands. So that's why we've been really aggressive at that lake. And so one of the primary projects we're working on there is a dredging project. This is actually the first time in the nation that a non-federal partner is dredging a federal facility. So there's a lot of attention from the Army Corps of Engineers, and you can imagine local landowners too, just on how does this project get done, how can it be successful and most efficient. So we've been doing most of the planning and management for that out of this office here. So the ultimate goal in the next 5 years is that we would remove 3 million cubic yards of sediment, and that would restore about 1,800 acre feet of storage. And so it's a step in the right direction for that particular lake and for the communities downstream and Wolf Creek Nuclear Generating Station. So we have a contractor in place. Their name is Great Lakes Dredge and Dock, and then a local engineering firm, EBH Engineering, that's helping us accomplish that project. Right now we're in the planning phase. Because it is a federal project, you can imagine there are a number of hoops and documentation that need to be in place to really make sure we're doing this right, from all the environmental concerns and then even in structural integrity of the dam and the project. And that's all being run out of our office. We're completing the environmental impact statement, and the public's had an opportunity to weigh in and provide comment on that for the past 45 days. And then we'll spend the next 6 months really completing the rest of the evaluation that's required from the Army Corps. And then hopefully sometime this point next year, we'll have a dredge in place and begin moving forward.
We just got about 30 seconds left. Federal or state funded?
Entirely non-federally funded.
Okay. And long-term, as far as financially goes, that is all covered already. So everything's in place financially to get the job done.
Correct. This past legislative session, the governor approved our first year of repayment of a 15-year bond in the amount of $20 million.
Perfect. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Susan about other reservoirs across the state of Kansas. You're watching Kansas Ag Report, and we'll see you in just a minute.
This segment brought to you by Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. Farmers Insurance, your best protection against the unexpected. Call Agent Dan Key at 785-408-5459. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com. Blue River Traders, the finest selection of Western-style furniture for your home. BlueRiverTraders.com.
John Redman's probably one of multiple projects that need to be done across the state of Kansas, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, John Redman's really the poster child of the sedimentation issue, but not the only one where it is an issue. And so we've really been focusing on reservoirs that have a significant need for supplying water supply to communities and population, and those that have a great amount of sedimentation. And so there are other priority reservoirs like Tuttle Creek Reservoir, which is on the Kansas and Big Blue River, provides a lot of water supply to the communities downstream, all the way down to Kansas City. So that just is another example of a high priority reservoir that we're working on. So dredging, really, it's kind of the last resort of the things that you want to do to address sedimentation. Our first effort, and probably the biggest bang for our buck, is looking in the watershed above the lakes and looking at practices that we can put on the ground to slow sedimentation that ends up in the lakes. Some good examples of practices that are really effective are stream bank stabilization. That's something that we've really been aggressive in putting in place. They happen to be fairly expensive practices from a watershed level, but we've been really focusing on finding good resources to provide to landowners to get those projects in place. Above John Redman Reservoir, in the next 2 years, we'll put in another 30 projects. And those 30 projects have the potential of reducing downstream sedimentation by about 42,000 tons of sediment every year. So again, a lot of bang for our buck. We're doing similar efforts like that above Tuttle Creek Reservoir and Perry Reservoir, all working with local stakeholder groups. We call them our RAPS groups. These Watershed Restoration and Protection Strategies groups. They're the on-the-ground stakeholders that can really interact with landowners and help us direct funding to the best projects in a watershed. The other thing that's been really effective, and while not a new thing, it's something that we're really recognizing has a great potential for slowing sedimentation, and that's the implementation of cover crops. Cover crops really helps from not only sediment management, but moisture management and nutrient management, adds to the overall soil health of a field. So there's a lot of benefit to the producer of putting the cover crops in, but downstream from a reservoir perspective, we know it has a lot of benefit to us too. So again, working with those local RAP stakeholder groups, we want to make sure that we can put in as many cover crops and no-till practices to improve the soil health and ultimately the soil loss that we can.
Tying in with the farmers, like you said, it's a win-win for both of you. How much, putting cover crops down, how much in the short amount of time we have here, how much sediment are we saving by just putting cover crops in?
It's difficult to quantify because it's so field specific. What we're learning now in the work with our watershed groups, and most recently a grant application that the Kansas Alliance for Wetlands and Streams has put in, is that it really is very field specific, not only from those soils, but from a producer's choice too, of the types of crops that will make the difference for them in the interim. So rather than saying this is the crop that needs to be in place and this is the magic amount of soil that would be protected, our efforts right now are working with those RAPS groups to find very local decisions on the best crop management and soil health.